All right, everyone. Welcome back to Dan's Astrology. I'm recording this today on March 30th, 2026. And what we're looking at today is a full moon in Libra. And at the time of recording this, the planet Venus is at the 29th degree of Aries, about to make her ingress into the domicile of Taurus, meaning that we are having a shift, a major shift in Venusian energy at the time of a full moon in Libra, a Venus ruled sign. So the fact that we have the opportunity to start things off on a positive note here. Now, the thing is, obviously, if you look around at the state of the world around you, it may be you may be giving up hope. You may be feeling a little bit angry about what's going on in the world. You may be feeling afraid and uncertain about your future. But in the midst of all of this, we can at least break things down into more kind of like manageable chunks of time. And as an astrologer, we're looking at we're doing things at the lunar level here today. We're looking at full moons and new moons and things like this. So we're looking at what happens at a monthly cycle, right? And in this sort of monthly window of where we have this full moon, in this moment, there are a number of things which are positive that we may be able to see as an opportunity to take advantage of. One of these being the change from Venus into a good dignity. And I'm a tropical astrologer. I'm not a sidereal astrologer. And what this means is that for me, there's an alignment between the astrology and the seasonal changes. And one of the things that I've been doing this year to cope with the stressful circumstances has been to get back into gardening. And at the moment, I'm basically awaiting. I've started some seedlings indoors, but I'm waiting for the weather to be appropriate to transplant them outside. Now, the thing is, here where I live, we've had a winter that didn't have any snow, and now we're into the spring, but it's like this weird middle ground where it's not cold enough to snow, but it's also not very warm. Like, there's been some springs where as soon as April rolls around, it's like damn hot out. It's not that kind of spring, right? It's this weird kind of middle ground where it's not very cold, but it's not very hot. And in the midst of this, right, there is this kind of anticipation for the transition into warmer weather. And there's the spirit in the air when finally the weather is a little bit nicer and it feels a bit like sunny and springy, and people are all gonna go outside and do gardening, and all the flowers are blooming and all this kind of stuff. And that you don't have to be an astrologer to sense a shift in subtle energies in a more positive direction, right? So that is what, with the full moon being a Venus ruled full moon, and with Venus gaining better dignity at a time when there's a movement in the natural environment towards those kinds of things, it's a good sign. And in the midst of all the despair and misery in the world, I will take any good sign. On top of this, there's another one: the fact that Jupiter is also exalted in Cancer, and that the full moon in Libra is the cardinal sign. Unfortunately, this one is not quite as positive, because it also, when you talk about the cardinal signs, you're also going to be talking about Aries, and you're going to be talking about the Saturn-Neptune conjunction in Aries, which is every time Saturn conjoins one of the outer planets. Let's face it, Saturn conjunct an outer planet in any sign, in any position, is probably going to be rough. If we look at, like, the last video I made, I was talking about how Saturn and Neptune conjunct in Aquarius happened during the potato famine in Ireland, right? And so there, Saturn and Neptune also, it also corresponds with things to do with like the Soviets, the Bolsheviks in Russia, and for maybe people who have different political opinions about those kind of things. Some people may see something like that as a total disaster, right? Like there's a lot of people out there who see a political revolution, meaning that it's like the riffraff have taken over society, right? It's like the lowest of the low have overturned the rightful order of things, and it's just like a disgrace, basically, right? Now, with that in mind, there's a certain kind of dicey thing about a problem of combining astrology and politics. But what can we say? Jupiter and Saturn traditionally had to do with things that were happening at a state level, right? Talking about empires, kingdoms, changes of, crucial turning points in the change of the affairs of how things are governed and all this kind of stuff. And with that in mind, here I'm a local Canadian guy. I'm walking a line with this one, I suppose, because some people suggest not to combine politics and astrology content creation. But to be fair, I'm actually pretty stoked that Avi Lewis just won the candidacy for the NDP, and to be honest, this has less to do with. I'm just going to give it to you straight here. Like I'm not a political pundit. This is not some sort of like carefully crafted message or anything like this. I'm just telling you the honest truth that my enthusiasm for Avi Lewis has more to do with the fact that he's married to none other than Naomi Klein. And recently, I have just finished reading Naomi Klein's book, Doppelganger, which was great. This is the first Naomi Klein book that I've read, although I started trying to listen to like an audio recording of like the shock doctrine, but I didn't listen to all of it. But the point is about Naomi Klein is that I am a millennial who grew up in BC, and from a young age, I was exposed to the ideas of no logo and all this kind of stuff, and the shock doctrine. I kind of grew up with a Naomi Klein influence. And one of the things about this is that I have to say that it's a kind of like there's this tension point with me about this, because I have to admit that I'm not going to go so far to call this a contradiction, but the fact is that I went and bought a pair of Nikes the other day, a pair of Nike Air Max 90s, and they were only actually $80, right? Which is, I would say, the problem about corporate stuff and logos and all this kind of thing is that if you're suckered into paying lots of money for some stupid thing just because it has a logo on it, you're kind of getting ripped off. But for me, there's this kind of weird thing happening where we're told everything's really expensive and there's going to be lots of tariffs and all this kind of stuff. But then it's always like this weird, if I'm like, well, maybe I'll buy, I have this unconscious addictive craving even, right? Consumerism, wanting to buy shoes. And then, but then it was like, I have a certain kind of guilt around just like going to the mall and buying a new pair of Nikes when I have a certain kind of anti-corporate attitude, right? And yet I did this, and the Nikes were I've never bought a pair of Air Max 90s for $80 before, right? I was blown away by how cheap these Nikes were, right? And at the same time, I realized there was a store where you could go and buy Patagonia. They were selling sweaters for like $300 or something, right? There's this kind of thing about like people say that there's no good consumption under capitalism, and that when it comes to like picking your brand of shoes or brand of footwear, like there's bigger problems out there. But there is this thing going where, do you know that New Balance, the sportswear brand New Balance, contributes a lot of money to Donald Trump and MAGA, and for this reason, I have to admit I do own one thing from New Balance, but I've decided not to buy anything else. And that, so like the thing is, there's this kind of thing about being, I still buy stuff, I still like am a consumer, and I still like buy things with, like, look at this. I'm wearing a Nike logo right now. So I still buy the Nike logo and I still wear it, but I like Naomi Klein. And so this is the thing: is this a contradiction? I would argue not, because the thing is, regardless, you have to wear. You have to wear something. You have to buy something. You have to participate. At some level, they've got you. You know, you have to participate in the economy. You have to participate in the system, right? I don't really, there's some people go like totally off grid, but even if you go off grid, you're still going to be wearing a pair of shoes one way or another, right? There's something about all this. Is it a contradiction to be against corporatism, to be against capitalism, and yet still go out and buy the Nikes, still go out and, I don't, or this is the kind of thing about like the idea of like, is making consumer choices, is that like a valid form of like doing boycotts? There's a lot of people doing boycotts right now. A lot of people canceling their subscriptions to Netflix. A lot of people canceling their subscriptions to Amazon, right? Trying to resist the big corporations, right? And the thing is, I have to admit that I've basically got it down right now, where obviously by doing this on YouTube, I'm still participating in the big corporation that is YouTube and Google and all this kind of stuff. And I mean, like, who put the internet infrastructure in the wall anyways? The corporations, right? So at some level, I'm still participating in this whole corporate thing, this whole infrastructure. And I'm off on some kind of tangent about it. One of the things I've noticed about YouTube, anyways, is that while other astrologers may bring up Naomi Klein, it's usually going to be like in the context of using a reference to the shock doctrine, and in to just talk about what's going on in politics right now, and the way that there's, as an astrologer, basically what you tend to do is be like, this is the current events, and we're going to go like all the stuff that happened this month, and like, the war that's happening. Is World War III going to break out? Are they going to, like, what's going on? All this kind of stuff, and it's just like so overwhelming, and we're so I don't know what to do, so I'll just sit here and watch like 6 hours of like somebody's like astrology. Like, I don't know, I'm just totally overwhelmed, so I'll just like I'm immobilized, and I'm just gonna sit around in my pajamas all day, eat popcorn, and watch like a 6 hour live stream where somebody else does the thinking for me, and I can just turn my brain off, basically, and then like have my attention fractured in a million different directions, and then then in the midst of all this, there's people saying like, we need to get people to stop doing this and learn how to read again and reclaim your attention span from that whole, like, being so that you're overwhelmed, you have no idea what to do, so you're just going to like fracture your attention in a million directions all at once, and like enter into this kind of like comatose zombie state where you can't think about anything, you can't pay attention to anything, and you can't deal with what's going on. And in the midst of all this, I recommend reading this book, because I found it to be actually a pretty easy book to read until you hit, this is the whole thing, until you, like, it was actually kind of difficult once it got to the whole problem about Israel and all this kind of stuff, right? And the thing is, this is what I realize, is that part of the I think this is also with the Saturn-Neptune conjunction right now, is that Saturn stands for this, like, the wall, the wall of apartheid. What can you say, right? The wall, the wall. Pink Floyd's The Wall, even, right? Like, but this oppressive wall that keeps us all separated, divided, silenced, and repressed, and all this kind of stuff. And yet, obviously, we can talk about that outside, but we have our own inner inner walls, our own inner boundaries, our own inner divisions. And it's like sometimes when you're trying to read, it's like I think the problem is, and you have a problem with attention span. I think I have a suspicion, anyways, that it's because we have these blockages that, like, whatever is going on with the politics in the Middle East, we don't want to look at it. We don't want to deal with it. We don't want to. So it's not even like we just have to be like, I don't want to think about this. I don't want to pay attention to this. I just need, give me the distraction machine, right? Like load me up, put me in front of the fucking poker machine. And I'm just like, I want to see like flashing lights and colors. And I don't want to think about bad things, right? And it's turned us all into a bunch of fucking morons, basically, right? And so, unfortunately, and I don't even know. Like, the thing is that for me, luckily, I've managed to adopt a number of strategies to avoid letting this happen to me. But I don't even, like, the problem, what I find most difficult about this is that, sure, you can dig yourself out of that hole where you can, work on your problems, but then you'll just have to live a lonely, isolating existence because all your friends are getting drunk at the fucking online 24-hour casino junk food machine, right? Like, that's where everybody is. You're gonna be a lonely little hermit out planting little seeds in your garden while everybody's like getting fucking jacked up at like 24-hour Las Vegas casino laser beam explosion center, right? Like that's like, this is basically the dynamic, right? I'm trying to, so with all that in mind, I have, I recommend this book, and I'm basically, I've decided what to do. What my strategy for how to deal with this problem is to keep making YouTube content, but I'm going to be frank with you. I'm frustrated by the level of quality of BookTube videos. I can't in clear conscience start a BookTube channel, right? It would be like, this is like I don't know. I have to admit, I haven't read any Hegel, but I listen to too much Slavoj Žižek and this kind of thing, right? And they talk about, and even Nietzsche talks about the bad conscience. I cannot, in good conscience, start a YouTube channel and like, this is what I'm doing is like, I'm doing this thing where it's a full moon in Libra. And I'm not well, I may play a little bit Balatro now and then, but I'm not participating in the cesspool of mass culture like the rest of you people. I'm trying my best to preserve a certain a sanctified my own little space of where I can do my own thing and do what's right for me, right? And I think that maybe there's something about the individualism of Aries. Aries is a kind of individualistic sign. There's a certain kind of like desire to assert your individuality and not give in to the stupidity of the herd. But I mean, I have to admit, it's kind of frustrating. It's a little bit frustrating. It's also it's a cause for concern when the things that you are into. There may be certain things that you like when you're into, and if the only way you can see that reflected to you or mirrored back to you in the culture is through the internet, and you're like, oh, I thought maybe like if I was into this kind of literature, or if I was into these kind of movies, or this kind of scene, that would be, there'd be like-minded people. Find the others. There's gonna be like-minded people. What if it turns out they're all a bunch of fucking morons, right? What if it turns out they're a bunch of or like that the only people that would have the will to what are you gonna do? A little book report tell you there's something about this that I'm gonna express to you what my problem is about this, is that imagine imagine every time you read a book and you finish it, that you earn brownie points, right? And in order for the idea of earning brownie points to make sense, there has to be somebody else there for whom these brownie points are register with and are legitimate with, right? There's the idea that you are like a little Girl Scout or a little Boy Scout, then you have your scout leader who basically what you're doing is that you're going to spend your time bettering yourself through the pursuit of reading and literature and all this kind of stuff. And then at the end of this, you're going to present what you're doing to your little Boy Scout, Cub Scout, Girl Scout, leader, and to be rewarded brownie points, right? Now, the point what you have to realize is that who's the brownie scout leader? It's not fucking Donald Trump. It's not Mark Carney. It's probably not your parents. They probably don't give a fuck. It's probably not, it's probably not the ghost of your dead father. It's probably not God. There isn't, this is the whole thing of, I'm not a Hegelian. I'm not a Lacanian, but there's this. There's this whole you're engaged in this project of trying to win brownie points for an authority figure, a superego, a parent that you're trying to please that isn't there, that doesn't give a fuck, and that you are like a boss, a manager, right? There's this this idea that our society has been structured now around this idea of, instead of being about the elites, the bourgeois and the proletariat, we have the professional managerial class, a whole class of managers who we are conditioned to think that every 6 months we're going to have a work review, and your boss is going to give you a report card and all this kind of stuff, and we just have that ingrained into us, so that even if we're doing something that's subversive and rebellious, we could be all my rebellious literature presented to my boss for approval, right? Fuck that, right? Fuck that. But at the same time, I'm going to vote for Avi. I'm gonna participate in the leadership race for our state authorities, who are part of media dynasties that all this kind of stuff. I'm still gonna participate in I'm still gonna go fucking buy some Nike stuff at the mall. Okay, I'm still gonna participate in all that stuff, and I know that is not perfect, but I'm still gonna participate, right? And there's a certain kind of it's frustrating that the reality is imperfect, and that it may not conform to our expectations or something, but that's the best we have to deal with, right? With all this in mind, another book that I've read. Basically, I've just finished reading a bunch of books that I got for Christmas, and I'm decided, basically, you've probably tuned in here expecting me to tell you all about Jupiter and Saturn and Venus and full moons and stuff like that, but instead I'm going to tell you about trying to read Thomas Pynchon, or I'm not succeeding in reading Thomas Pynchon, I should say, right? And but failing, I'm basically, this whole thing, this whole project, this whole endeavor known as YouTube, right? The idea that you're going to have discrete channels, where on one channel I'm making an astrology broadcast. On another channel, I'm making a booktube where I'm reporting to my, overseer, controller, manager, KGB officer, goddamn kindergarten teacher that rules my life secretly from afar, to ask them if I'm doing a good job or not. Yeah, fuck that, right? Fuck that. Should I do less books on my astrology channel and start a new one? Or if I try to do that, am I going to be locked into an infinitely recurring loop of authorization where I'm basically shadow banned from starting any new YouTube channels? Yeah, I get it. You don't want people like me to make booktube channels. I get it. You don't want people like me to be literate. You don't want people like me to have a chance to say something. You don't want people like me to participate in a community. You don't want people like me to have a voice, to have a perspective, to have a story to tell. I get it, right? And the good news is that luckily we have the opportunity to engage in, we have fiction to serve as a balm, right? For our a comforting fantasy that can give us a bit of relief In the so that we can take these energies and express them in perhaps another way other than just banging your head against the wall, right? Um, the I am cautious about saying anything about what the significance of the Thomas Pynchon novel is, because from the very beginning of my decision to read said novel, it has been marred by a certain kind of synchronicity, um, and it's like to the point where, well, the funny thing about it basically is that there's the idea of like it reading a novel to play out a kind of escapist fantasy or something like this, right? But the problem is like there's a number. One of the themes about this book has to do with the Balkans, and like the other thing too is that of having friends that are more experienced with traveling than me, and like I was what it's hard to socialize with a bunch of people who've gone have all these like good travel stories and like have done all this adventurous stuff, and that you feel like you need to do some adventuring to catch up with the people you're hanging out with. This is more about where I was at in my 20s than anything I'm doing right now, though. But like the thing is, the first time I ever went traveling and I ever went overseas, I went to the Balkans. So there's this funny phenomenon with this book because it involves this guy from Milwaukee going on a secret mission that leads him to the Balkans in Europe, and there's something about like if the everything about imagining the Balkans, um, and there's like you using your own personal experience to give this the fantasy, the story, the feeling that you're actually there participating in it. But the funny thing, it starts to feel very like you're kind of like. Well, the thing about it is, like, I mean, like when it comes to like Budapest, I took a train from Vienna to Belgrade, and I just skipped through Budapest. But there's one of these things where there's another story that I read that was, what was it? I think Weird Studies did it. It was like a short story. Was it Mawkin or was it somebody else? The one about there's a story set in that area of Hungary where and there's this thing where it's like of like your first time traveling and you're like in this train that's going from Vienna to there's also this funny thing like in the Pynchon book there's this like the train's like chug 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 and it's like it feels like the train is calling you a chump with the chump 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 as it drags you from Vienna to the Balkans. And there's something about with how Naomi Klein is talking about maybe the more utopian kind of red Vienna that existed before World War II that Freud and Jung were part of, or there's a kind of more of a humanitarian project to provide therapy and stuff like this that then flipped into fascist eugenics and stuff, things like this, right? And the idea of like this slide that we're having into fascism and Balkanization, all this kind of stuff. And it was like the experience of actually going to Serbia, going on an adventure there. And one of the things about this is that I'm going to be entirely like my whole thing about being politically progressive is that my family, bunch of Eastern Europeans who were basically like I didn't have much firsthand experience of dealing with this from them, but apparently they like if you're Eastern European and you're going to be racist in this kind of way, right? There are certain minorities where if you're from one place, your neighbors in the other place, you don't like them, and you're gonna get into fights with them and stuff like this, right? And to go like I don't have growing up, I had plenty of friends of all sorts of different ethnicities, of all sorts, friends of ethnicities that my ancestors wouldn't have liked, all this kind of stuff. But there's something to go to the Balkans and to experience that friction firsthand and be surrounded by people that could some of the Serbs are fucking massive. They're like giants, right? They're like these people that would just crush you like a twig, and you're like, I don't know. There's something about the firsthand being immersed in that kind of environment and having that kind of perspective on. I mean, I'm not in the Balkans now. I'm still at home basically, right? But the problem is basically there's some underlying. There's a will to Balkanize Canada, right? To turn British Columbia against Alberta, to inflame the separatism of Alberta, to this divide and conquer strategy, to shatter Canada, or to also just play up the Canadians versus Americans thing with the tariff wars and the trade wars, and with all of this, it's a roundabout way of saying there's also this whole thing going on with Cuba. And I was doing all my tarot cards, and my tarot is basically, I took it as a warning not to get involved in these kinds of political disputes, because the point is that I'm just running my mouth and just kind of coming up with something to say on the fly. And it could be very well that there's a certain, the same way that there's a certain kind of contradiction perhaps in being very anti-corporate but then wanting to go and buy all the fucking, it's not that I even like Nike particularly, but the point is that fuck New Balance, basically. Fuck New Balance. Fuck you mega sons of bitches. I'll buy it, I don't know, what am I supposed to do? I'm gonna buy something, and I'm not gonna buy the stuff that's supporting Donald Trump, and that's gonna be good enough. And I'm going to try to support, you can actually go to a mall or go in person rather than doing everything online to get to the house, maybe. I don't know. There's funny, in the neighborhood where I live, there's a mall, there's a mall on an Indian reservation, right? And recently I heard the political conversation where people are saying that the government of Canada has been falling short for the natives, and so basically they're being left in a vulnerable position, and the corporations are coming in to fill the gap, basically, right? So instead of having, you're having big corporations trying to win over the natives and be friendly with them, because the idea of the hyper-conservatism that, what the future of politics is that the government of Canada, the government of British Columbia, or whatever, they're all just going to be corporate entities, and Walmart is going to be the bigger one, is going to be the big fish, right? Where you're going to have whole nation states are going to collapse. There's already the Soviet Union sold part of their navy to Pepsi. Right? This is what I'm trying to say, is that countries are going to be out, and it's just going to be corporations, and you're not going to have any fucking rights with them. So this is why I'm trying to say, fucking, don't, why, and if you're doing content creation, who gives a fuck? Why not just do a booktube channel on your astrology channel and say, fuck you? Yeah. All right. Thanks for watching. This is Dan's Astrology. Check you later.